There we go.
Thank you very much, Corban. And my name is Wim de Koning, and we will give everybody a minute or so to decide whether they want to stay here with me and three amazing panelists, ensuring sustainable food production systems. And of course, I'm already stuttering a little bit because my words are not as beautiful as Daisy's. So Daisy, thank you very much for your words. I think this is enough time for everybody to make up their minds. Kia ora, everybody, and welcome to this session on ensuring sustainable food production systems for the future. My name is Wim de Koning. I work for Lincoln University. I teach business and sustainability. I have the honor of leading our innovation hub on the Lincoln University campus as well, called Blink Innovation. And I'm also trying to cause trouble in the sense of creating circular farms and circular economies here at our campus. But it's not about me. It is about how we can actually create this sustainable food system. So I'm going to share my screen. I will have one slide setting the scene, and then I'll introduce the panelists. What I do is after I've introduced them, I will introduce all three, so that then afterwards the panelists will actually rotate by themselves. This will all go automatically. At least that's what we practiced. And then I will take the room back, and there will be a room for questions. And so please, if you have any comments, put them in the chat, and I will see how much we can do from a time perspective. I'm going to share my screen now. And what you'll see is a little pyramid. And I'm assuming that we cannot change the past. We can perhaps not even change this moment in time, right? Because when I just saw that, when I was just telling you guys that change this moment in time, it has already passed. So we can't change that. So in other words, the only thing that we can change is the future. So this is a drawing that that Kevin Dull made in 2015, and I'm using it a lot in my lectures because it's basically about going from one system to another, and there is a gap, and we need to build a bridge or create a ladder or have a solar-powered helicopter or whatever we will want to do to go from our current system into a future system. Is there a simple bullet? Nah. Because if there would be a simple bullet or a silver bullet or a simple question, we would have already done that. So if we want to go from our current food production system to a more sustainable, future-proof production system, we basically need to have different pathways, because it won't be one path to actually go into the future food system. Luckily, we have a panel, and this panel will actually bring together the different pathways. We'll have a new young generation New Zealand farmer. We'll have a research scientist that actually looked at regenerative agriculture and the different pathways that actually define that terminology. But we're also talking about a business person that is actually trying to get involved into sustainability in the form of organic produce. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the panel. And the first speaker will be Lincoln. Lincoln is the son of Mr. Roper and Mrs. Roper. And they are the largest red onion producer on the South Island. But he's also, or he was also one of my students, and amazing person. And sometimes we learn from our students, and Lincoln was definitely one of those students that I learned from. So I'm really interested what he has to say. Then we're going to talk. Then we're going to listen to Gwen from Manaka Whenua Land Care Research. She has looked into regenerative agriculture, and she has looked at the different pathways that can be used to actually come up to what we call regenerative agriculture. Again, then we are making the switch to Brendan, and Brendan is the managing director of Buy Pure New Zealand. Buy Pure New Zealand. So, in other words, that is a commercial entity. So we'll get the industry view on the matter as well. Brendan has a uniquely strong background in organic produce, both from a supply chain and a selling point of view. So he is definitely an advocate for different production systems. So without any further ado, I will stop sharing my screen, and I would like to give the floor to Lincoln. And after Lincoln is finished, then Gwen will take over, and then after Gwen, Brendan will take over, and after Brendan is done, I will continue with the panel discussion. Lincoln, take it away. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thanks, Wim. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Beauty. Okay. Sorry about that. Oh, I can't share my screen yet. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, thumbs up?
Yep, fine.
Beautiful. Okay. So, sorry, my computer just logged out as Vim was starting to introduce me, so I missed that beautiful introduction, sorry. But as Vim sort of introduced me, my name's Lincoln Roper. So I suppose a little bit about me is that I hail from Canterbury. I was lucky enough to grow up in a small township at that time, which was Lincoln. And then obviously I've been lucky enough to attend Lincoln University as well as part of my studies. I suppose, you know, throughout my time at university, I tried to get as much exposure to sort of primary production systems across the world as I would see it, but nothing in the Northern Hemisphere as yet. But I feel very fortunate to have seen things in the likes of Western Australia and then right across to the Chatham Islands. And it's definitely sort of changed my perspective on not only sustainability, but how sort of sustainability is wrapped around, you know, the societal impacts that it has and sort of primary production and food production and how important that is throughout that whole, you know, sphere of things. So I guess the main reason I'm here, which I'm very fortunate to be involved in, is my family's business, Roper and Son. So we're actually celebrating our 30th birthday this year. So I'm very fortunate to be involved in that. So I guess it's a really good time for us to reflect on, you know, where we've come from and where we're going, especially with me being a second generation grower. And I suppose my father, because he won't see this, I can talk about him a little bit. He, you know, he spent a couple of years, you know, working 18-hour days, 20-hour days, just to establish what we've got today. And I feel very fortunate for what we have. And sustainability is a huge part of that. And, you know, sustainability in terms of being able to sustain a family business that sort of has a wider impact on the environment is absolutely critical to me as a person. So I guess today, you know, we've built out from a first generation grower. Dad started with a couple of hectares and he worked at another farm and he worked for himself in evenings. And then, you know, you expand that to today where we're farming up to 200 hectares and we're lucky enough to have reach right down the value chain to supermarkets and stuff like that. We grow a range of crops, including, you know, small seeds, cereal production. We're lucky enough to grow vegetables such as beetroot, pumpkin, and obviously our specialty is red onions, and that's what Dad's built us and our family around. This is just a photo of myself, my father, and my younger brother. So obviously, intergenerationally, it's very important for us as a family to be doing the right thing, not just talking about it, but also, you know, influencing it and doing it on the ground. So I guess our whole philosophy, and I didn't want to talk about facts and stuff like that. I just wanted to talk about us as a family, how we're doing things differently to probably a bigger farm or a bigger business, is that our whole philosophy, and Dad sort of passed it down to us, is that, you know, you'd have to start sowing the seeds as such. Sorry for the pun, but today, and it starts today. you know, you start working today and the payoff will be in the future, and you're not going to see it straight away. Sometimes you will, but sometimes you probably won't. So that's probably been passed down to us. I guess there's a couple of sustainability initiatives that both we as a family and I as a person see being absolutely critical to us going forward. Important from my perspective is waste utilisation. So I've just finished an internship in Blenheim working with a seafood company around waste. It's been quite interesting to learn about how important that kind of is going forward, you know, diverting it from landfill or wherever it goes to something that might be a value capture or something that, you know, is going to have a greater impact environmentally. Energy is an important one for us. You know, none of our initiatives are going to be able to be influenced if they don't have clean green energy. And one of the things that we've been in sort of consultation with is with Vim, along with Vim and his initiatives at university, working around, you know, how can we as a business, you know, partner with the Lincoln University Energy Farm and how we can be a part of that story. It's obviously going to transform and go many places. And then probably one that's really been influenced since I've sort of started stepping into the business more was around precision agriculture and using technology. It's sort of been in the last 5 years that we've really taken on significant investment in that area, you know, to be more efficient, like using less diesel, for example, or less passes in the paddock. It's important not only financially, but, you know, if you don't need to be doing something, you shouldn't be doing it. As a business, that's very important to us. And as a family, I mean, you know, being more efficient at doing stuff is absolutely critical. You know, there's a lot of stuff that we do on farm that we actually can't tell the story around because we're not well enough resourced. And I think that's a critical area that I would want to personally be involved in is, you know, how do we sell those stories better? You know, people need to be resourced to do that. So yeah, definitely a high level run through of what we're about, but looking forward to the questions and those sort of things. But one of the major things is, you know, we've already started that journey right here, right now. You know, we're starting to make some partnerships. I encourage you to reach out to me. I'm always up for a conversation or a coffee or just to catch up to talk about this stuff. I'm going to be a next generation grower, so the more people and sort of initiatives that I see, the better I'm prepared to do something on the ground one day. So yeah, thank you for your time. And I will.
Thank you, Lincoln. Gwen?
Good. Can you all hear me and share my screen now then?
Yes, I can hear you, I can see you, and you can share your screen. Perfect.
Great. Okay. So Kylea Kutu, it's a pleasure to be here. Delight to be invited to talk about regenerative agriculture in New Zealand. I'm a senior researcher at Waka Eke Noa Research, and I've spent the last 4 years of my working life diving into what is regenerative agriculture and has it got the potential to help New Zealand resolve some of its environmental, social, and potentially some of its economical issue amongst the farming community. So just very quickly, I'm going to go through some attempt to take you through what we understand is regenerative agriculture, give you some New Zealand examples because this is a buzzword that mostly came from the United States. Have a little dive into what we need to know about it in order to decide whether we want to roll it out all over New Zealand or not. And then some perspective on whether it has the potential to help New Zealand meet the target 2.4 of the SDG. So in terms of definition, there is a lot of debate on the press to whether it has a definition, whether it should be defined. And at the moment, we've talked to a lot of people and we've decided we don't really want to set up a really clear and concise definition because it will halt its ability to evolve. And what we critically need at the moment is to stay adaptive and flexible and forward-looking. So the definition is more in terms of principles. So Regenag rely on the 5 principles of soil health that were developed by the USDA and the Soil Health Coalition in the United States, and which is keep your soil cover, limit the disturbance, so reduce tillage, keep living roots all year round, increase and harness diversity, and integrate livestock regardless of the land use. And what we did in the last year is we rolled out some consultation with leading regenerative practitioners. As a result of this, we also looked at what research was really needed for us to make decision about Regen Ag in New Zealand, and we released our white paper last month, so you can find it online. It's publicly available. When talking to the Regen Ag practitioners, we found out that what they see as regenerative agriculture is to be outcome focused, principles driven, and not defined by the practices, which of course defeats and slightly challenge the scientists, because we usually design our experiment based on practices that we want to compare. So here we emerge with these practitioners 11 principles, and you can see that half of them on the left are mindset and attitude, and half of them on the right are basically similar to the 5 principles of soil health. In the mindset and attitude, there is a very key one, which is to make context-specific decision, which means one size doesn't fit all. Every farm is different. Every farm is unique. And what might work in one place of the country might not work in other places of the country. So just to give you an example, this is a vineyard on its pathway to embracing regenerative agriculture. It's doing very well. It's won quite a lot of awards in 2019. And you can see that instead of having a really clean, nicely mown grass, you have a kind of a mess in between the vines, the row of vines with cover crops, multi-species. So a very different way of managing the vineyard. Here is an example of a dairy regenerative operation. On the left, you can see that the cows are grazing with a very high cover of grass. And on the right, when we do a close-up photo, you can see that the diversity of the forage that they're being offered is very high. And so the principle is to increase your diversity, increase the amount of grass that grows, so you increase the amount of carbon that is then injecting into the soil. You change the pasture composition, you change the feed quality that you feed to your cows. Right. So in terms of, we consulted a lot of people, and we tried to emerge the main research areas that we need to dive into for us to really understand what is the potential that Regen Ag has to offer for New Zealand. At the same time, a small group of us led a pilot study comparing mostly a livestock operation that were applying a regenerative management versus a livestock operation that were operating a conventional management. And so this is a small pilot study. It's still being written up, so it's still unpublished and unreviewed. But I can share with you that what we found is, although we had a slightly higher amount of carbon per hectare, the mean were not different, so we couldn't find any detectable significant increase in soil carbon. We also found no decrease in soil nitrogen stocks, despite the practitioners reducing substantially the amount of fertilizer that they used. And we found a very significant increase in soil health. So potentially some impact on the environment that are positive. Now, looking at the practices that have been scrutinized, this is the draft new farm planning guidance from MFE. So this was the draft that was put online in December. When you look at all the practices that they are suggesting farmers embrace to decrease their greenhouse gas emission, most of them are actually already embraced by the Regen Ag practitioners, and there are some others that they are doing that also have a great potential. And I would like to finish by, in terms of the potential, so I'm showing you some preliminary data that suggests there is some advantage to be had. But really, my main thinking has been, if we're going to meet the SDG, this needs to be a collaborative effort, and it needs to be done across the board in a wider agri-food system. And what we're seeing really clear signal from the investors with BNZ now, the announcement of a new loan to promote biodiversity and freshwater positive outcome. The New Zealand Merino company that is launching its first regenerative wool certificate. And then across the borders, you have other initiatives that are really pushing this regenerative agriculture context. So as far as I'm concerned, this is not my personal opinion. I think the scientists have there's a great value in looking at what Regen Ag can offer, because there's a huge momentum that is not only coming from the grassroots, but also from all the investors, and in some countries, it's political willingness to push this forward. And that's it for me. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Gwen. Brendan, are you ready?
Good to go?
Yeah, fantastic. We can see
Everybody can see us.
we
Kia ora
can
no tātou. My name's Brendan. So I'm going to be talking about what we do, but in a broader context as well. Just a brief introduction on myself. Others describe me as an animateur, someone that breathes life into projects. I often think I just talk about the outrageous obvious. That's about New Zealand's role. I only really often just consider us about what New Zealand can do to the world. I'll come back to that a bit later. But I understand the frustration. It's fantastic to be with such a broad range of people today. And I do hear a frustration, this inability to sort of break through or push through what seems to be the obvious. But I really want to encourage us to understand that sort of we are the leaders we've been waiting for. This is it. There's not a lot of else that can do. So let me just share a little bit about some of the community that I work with and the work that we do. Okay, so I'm in the commercial business. That's what my company does. I've got a broad background. It includes 10 years in academia. And and one of the wonderful things about the organic community is that we have this really vibrant international network of active people, a little bit like what we're doing tonight, but it's global and highly interactive and transparent, looking at a sort of multi-level integration and change. So we've done quite a bit of work around how the SDGs fit, or how organics can add to the SDGs. I'm going to be sharing all these slides. You'll be able to get these, but this is some initial work done not only on increasing positive impact, but reducing negative impacts. And you'll see there's some other data that includes other SDGs, but these are some highlights. I won't go into them specifically, but you can have a look at those later, but you'll probably pick up on the numbers. They're highly variant. So one of the particular things about the organic community or the organic offer into society is that it's not just a production system. So what it is that the organic system has been developed over time. So we've got over 8 decades, what we call the modern organic movement, really emerged out of the 1920s, particularly post-World War I, a lot of affected people, observation of what's happening with food, often by people in the dental and other health, it was often health practitioners that could measure that. And this is a piece of work we've done and participated in actively, is understanding the transitions over 8 decades that we've been through. So organic 1.0 is this sort of need around health and nourishing, protecting the environment, and 2 is establishing certification or means of measuring. We've been doing that for over 4 decades. But really what the sector globally is communicating now is that it's got to be more than that. As we've sort of got the base, we've got the measures, now we need to push out around their sort of economic, social, cultural, transparent, much of what that SDG work is asking us to do. So here's a model talking about that, around us trying to move from a more traditional, conventional and modern, but really I see the work that we do, you know, and in fact, all of us probably have to bear the weight of, is it's hard being the sharp end of an arrow. It blunts easily. So what we're talking about is a cultural transformation and the role of organic farming in that cultural transition. I'm very comfortable with that. That's a type of leadership role. Doesn't often make heroes of us, but we've got to do the groundwork and get it done. And it's been going on for a very long time. So the challenge is, how do we change? How do we create this cultural transformation? Because I was really inspired by the overall title of tonight about be the change. Actually, that's a verb. I want to be the change. I'm not going to passive participant. I'm actually going to be part of that. So how do we be that change? So this is the work. I've been very fortunate to have some wonderful mentors in my life. I attended at Hawkesbury University my master's around this transitional strategy. So we've moved from a very pioneering, low input, high production. We're in a mode of high production over here. And Richard Borden ran a whole program in Australia at a university, very dynamic around, critical theory. We've actually got to move into higher values of humanity. And Stuart Hill has done the same, the idea of redesigning our future. And Morgan Williams, who was our environmental commissioner for a long time, used a lot of Stuart's work in how to do that. How do we actually redesign our world? Because a lot of the time we're shuffling around with the status quo. It's unacceptable. So part of that is you've got to start with the small and doable. Actually, I'm going to go back. I apologize. There's a key thing. We've got to act out of our core selves. And acting out of our core self, our unrealized potential, all of us at this meeting tonight believe that we can be part of that change. I just really encourage us to hold into that. Lincoln and Gwyn also involved. They want to be part of this change. And so we've got to support and believe that we are, but we've also got to recognize there's a lot of hurt collectively and individually. And we've got to recognize that. So the second part of that change is we've got to start with small, doable, meaningful initiatives that mean that we can carry through right to completion. So we've forgotten about reduce, reuse and recycle. We've accepted that as part of our society. Now we might be quite cynical saying we haven't actually done much of that, but we're starting to talk about repair, regenerate, redesign. Gwyn's talked about regenerate, but look at all the other E's. Rescue, we need to be responsible, rebel, we've talked about that. I heard some of this language tonight. So sometimes it can be very powerful to refuse. So this is things that we can do in our daily lives and in our businesses and think much more dynamic and actually live and measure that change. So one of these ideas about change, to be the change for us individually, and I put this one in here and it comes from Stu Hill's work. Stu's a professor in social ecology in terms of radical change, because that's what we're talking about. We've got to dare to believe that we can be whatever our dream might be. So one of the things is to boldly lie about what we have already done that we actually haven't done. And by doing this, it enables us to truly believe in our potential, both individually and collective. And that requires deep reflection, and then implementation of very doable initiatives. When I first started surfing, this was unimaginable. So when I mentioned earlier about the outrageous obvious, we have to believe that, my vision is that New Zealand could be an organic eco-nation. I think all of us just need to focus on our corner of the net, hold it up, be strong. This is all referenced. There's lots of further reading. People are welcome to contact me as they see fit. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Brendan. That was really, really good. We had three really, really, really good speakers, and rather than me now trying to summarize what we heard, I like to jump into a couple of questions that you, as an audience, submitted to us, and I will have one question for every panelist, and then I'll see what more questions are coming in the chat, and we're looking at timings as well, because I am being told that we need to finish at 8:29 sharp. Lincoln, question for you. For graduates entering the primary sector, what would you like them to understand by the term sustainability?
Well, that's a good one. I suppose I was pretty fortunate when I came out of university that I had a bit of exposure, obviously, with what I've learned in in Vim's class, and I suppose, you know, sustainability, it's going to be absolutely critical going forward. And if you don't have a grounding for it, then I honestly don't know how. Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of, I can give you examples of at least 2 or 3 of my fellow graduates who are actually, you know, they might have studied different variances of sustainability, courses at university, but to be honest, at least, you know, 15-20% of their component of their graduate is dedicated to a sustainability project. So there's guys that have done ag science and stuff like that that are working on that. So if I had one piece of advice, it would be to, if not learn what sustainability actually is, but actually enroll in a class that you can learn about, you know, the ins and outs of it, what it actually means, not only today what it means, but, you know, in the next 10 years going forward, what it's going to mean for sustainability in terms of food and production sort of things. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lincoln. Gwen, I have a question for you. Or it's not me that has the question. These are our participants that have the question. What systemic changes do we need to make? What systemic changes do we need to make? What systemic changes do we need in New Zealand to reduce food waste and promote a more circular, regenerative food system?
That's a really big question that goes beyond regenerative agriculture.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So, well, one example that I will give you is there is a self-organized network of farmers that have actually received funding from MPI to develop a peer-to-peer learning group and network, and with platform and tools. And those farmers together, there's over 3,000 members on the Facebook group, so it's big. These farmers are learning how to practice regenerative agriculture, and when the lockdown occurred, they started to get really very much into a direct sale. So from farmers to farmers in terms of supplies and equipment, because there's a lot of practices that are still hindered by the lack of adequate equipment or supplies, such as, for example, your seeds that are not pre-treated because they're trying to reduce the use of insecticide and so on. And then they are now just setting up a platform to have a direct sale, so customers can just sell. So that's just like cutting out the middleman and scaling, exponentializing the speed of transfer directly. They are using all sorts of composting and recycling of their green waste and all the manure and all the fecus coming from the animals. Ultimately, I believe that the only way we're going to really reduce the food waste, and if we start going more into the direct sale, because any time that we go through a large grocery store, there's always going to be a waste. And then reconnecting the people with the food production, because the majority of people are living in cities, have no idea how food is produced, have a lot of the time no real respect for food, and waste is just part of the normal, and we need to depart from that. So it's with education. Yeah, I will shut up to give some more time for other questions.
Gwen, thank you so much. Brendan, I have a question for you, or not me, but like I'm just going to read it up. But our participants lodged this question. Developed countries are managing the use of chemical inputs really well. But in countries like India, where farmers are not so educated, there has been excessive use of chemicals in the field, causing various problems both to nature and human health. Do we think organic agriculture is the way to go in such countries? I think the participant means the less developed countries. And do you think organic agriculture has the potential to feed the masses and be affordable? So again, not a small question. Brendan, up to you.
Sure. I think one of the things we need to consider is the mythology, the stories. I come from the idea of change. First, we need literacy And we need literacy. When I talk about literacy, it's around the literacy of biology, the literacy of ecology, the literacy of understanding systems. We need self-governance. We need Indigenous knowledge to work and talk about Indigenous knowledge. It's quite a patronising idea that I need to feed someone else. New Zealand can't feed itself. So there's this perpetuation of the mythology doesn't help the SDGs. I'm going to bring it back to the SDGs. I got full confidence in people in India can feed themselves. Absolutely. I spent 6 years wandering right through Asia looking at traditional farming systems. In fact, some of the origins of the leaders of the modern organic sector learnt their trade in India, Korea, China, Japan, around how people have fed themselves for thousands of years, let alone the gardeners of the P&G for 40,000 years. So it's the sort of idea of the food system that we're in. So do we want to change the food system or not? So I'm not really drawn into the idea that we have to feed the world and they've got a problem. Their problem is probably one that collectively the industrial agricultural or the industrial system, which includes, what colonization, the design of colonization was actually about. And, there's this need for mass liberalization, actually. And so when we talk about SDGs, what future do we actually want? That's why I really love Daisy's poetry, because it's probably going to be the arts that change culture. Dance, poetry, music, and a self-belief. So that's that, Kai is mana.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Do you realize that what we just talked about in the last 40 minutes is already history? But I really hope that, like what Lincoln said, we can look at it as a seed, so that we can actually use the previous 40 minutes to sow that seed for the future. Because like Gwen said, it is all a collaborative effort. And Brendan so very, very clearly said, listen, act out of your core self. So I do apologize, guys, that time slipped away, but I've been on the edge of my seat listening to the three wonderful panelists, and I hope you were as well. We will hold on to the questions in the chat, and I think that we can share those later on, so that if anybody wants to react on that, that will be possible. This is it from me and Lincoln, Gwen, and Brendan, and I'm giving it back to Corbin, because I think he will coordinate the rest of the group coming back into the main chat.